Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing okay. Welcome to the start of a new project. We're going to be playing Children of Morta, as you can see. But before anything else, I just had a couple of things I wanted to say. Number one, this is not going to be a blind series. I have played this game before. In fact, I have beaten this game before. And in fact, I do believe, unless new achievements were added recently, I might even have every single Steam achievement for this game. So, suffice it to say, I have played this game a lot. The second thing I wanted to say right at the start was that this first video is going to be entirely me just talking about the game. Specifically, I will be, without giving any spoilers, talking about the feel of this game and how it's different from other games in the same general category. So, yeah, I'm just gonna get into it. This game, when I first heard about it, I saw it described as a roguelite with a T, a roguelite with RPG elements. And as soon as I heard that, I was intrigued because I love roguelikes with a K as well as excuse me, as well as roguelites with a T. And going forward, I'm just going to use the catch-all term roguelike because vocally distinguishing between the two every single time is gonna get pretty old pretty quick. So just gonna be saying roguelike. But what I was saying was that I love roguelikes, I also love RPGs, and a game that combined the two, instantly, that's the kind of thing that would grab my attention. So I picked this game up, and I played it, and immediately fell in love with it. It's a great game, I loved it all the way through. Having said that, it did feel different from the other major games in the roguelike genre or category that I played. And to show why this game is different, I think it's best to maybe think about some of the more famous roguelike or roguelite games, and specifically the kinds of feelings they evoke, especially as a new player to those games. Think, for example, of something like The Binding of Isaac, where no matter how well your run is going, all it takes is one bad item pickup to turn a run that couldn't possibly lose into one that now can't possibly win. And if you think I'm exaggerating, then you have not played Isaac. Or you could think of Dead Cells, where no matter how cautious you are, all it takes is one room where the enemies catch you by surprise, and you will be going down. You will be seeing that, I believe it says, body desecrated, the message that shows up when you die, and you see your hard earned cells just spilling out across the screen. Or take Hades, for example, a much more recent game that only got its full release last year. I love that game, by the way. Possibly my favorite game of all time. But even in that game, you could be playing flawlessly for half an hour straight. All it takes is one passage, 30 to 40 seconds of subpar play, and you will be dying, and you will be seeing that very familiar graphic of Zagreus sinking into the river Styx. So, what do all of these games have in common? Is that the combat is. If you like that style of combat, you would call it intense, and if you didn't like it, you would call it stressful. That is one thing those games have in common, is that you always feel like you are never that far away from dying, no matter how well prepared you feel. At least when you're still new to the game. When you know the game's inside out, it's a little bit different, but this is what your first experience will feel like. And the other aspect, aside from the stressfulness of the combat itself, is the fact that if you do end up dying, games like these will generally impose some sort of penalty on you, and it can be pretty steep. For example, Isaac, which is closer to a true roguelike with a K, in that you generally don't get credit for the important things in the game unless you completely finish the run. Meaning, you don't get partial credit for almost beating Delirium, right? You need to actually go the whole distance. If you die with the final boss of only having 1 HP left, it's essentially the same to the game as if you died at the very first room. So that is to say that your progress is very much dependent on you finishing the entire run. Even roguelites with a T, like Dead Cells and Hades, where you can accumulate progress over time, meta progress, resources, you can make yourself stronger, stuff like that. Even in those games, your rate of progress will be a lot slower if you're not consistently killing the bosses. So if you do die, yeah, you could make some progress based on what you've gathered, but you will still be left wondering what you could have done in the run if only you had played better. So those are the two elements that I think a lot of people associate with the roguelike genre, is that the combat is stressful and you are paying a penalty if you fail in a run. And this game is a little bit different. So, depending on what kind of gamer you are, as I said, if you enjoy that style of play, you would call it exhilarating. If you didn't, you would call it anxiety-inducing. And this isn't to say that, there's a hard dividing line. Like, I love Hades, I love Isaac and Dead Cells. I've played the hell out of those games. But even I sometimes feel like playing a game that takes some elements of the roguelike concept, but without necessarily the stressful elements. And every once in a while, I feel like playing a game like that. And for the longest time, I never found a game that scratched that itch perfectly until I came across Children of Morta. Now, what makes this game different? Well, those two elements that I mentioned about stressful combat and steep penalties for failing a run, those are essentially absent from this game. Meaning, the combat is a lot different, and if you do die, you don't feel like you lost that much. Now, this isn't to say that this is a casual game, or even necessarily that it's an easy game. No, it's actually has a fair amount of challenge in it, and you have to give the game respect. You have to be willing to learn how to play it. You can't just sleepwalk your way through this game. What makes a difference is that the challenge it throws at you is the kind of challenge that you can adapt to in real time. Whereas in a game like Hades or Dead Cells, you can tell that there are things the developers put in there with the express purpose of killing new players who haven't encountered that game mechanic before, with the intention being that after you've died, 5, 10, 15 times, you'll slowly develop a strategy to cope with that. And a lot of people don't like that style of play. Like dying over and over again is not everyone's cup of tea, especially because the traditional style of game design has conditioned us to feel like if we are dying over and over, that we're playing the game wrong. Now, I could go into a whole argument about why we shouldn't necessarily feel that way and how games can be designed differently, but I think I'll save that for if/when I do a Let's Play for either Dead Cells or Hades. For now, about this game, I will say that you will not have that feeling. That's not to say you'll never die in this game. You probably will, but that your deaths will most likely be the kinds of deaths that you would have in a more traditional game. Meaning, you died because you were either distracted or you were being careless or knowingly taking some kind of a risk rather than you dying because the developer has decided that you have to die because they're going to throw a totally crazy new game mechanic at you out of nowhere. So that is the kind of game this is. To summarize it a bit more succinctly, what I would say is that in this game, the main focus isn't about the intensity of the survival experience. And I think that is a fair way to kind of generally describe games like Hades or Dead Cells, that it's about making you feel like surviving is a hard thing to do. This game is not like that. This game gives you a challenge, but a much more a challenge that is much more friendly to people playing it for the first time. And its ultimate goal isn't to make you feel like getting through the game at all, like surviving at all, is a real challenge. No, the game's purpose, at least to me, is that it wants to reveal its story to you, and it wants to do that in a consistent and a regular way, and it doesn't want you to get bogged down dying over and over again. So, all of that is to say that if you're the kind of person who liked the idea of roguelikes, right? Like, you like the idea of procedural generation, you like the idea of different builds from run to run, you like the idea of finding different encounters each time you go in. If you like those parts, but you weren't necessarily always a fan of the stressful combat and of feeling like you're always balanced on a razor's edge, and if you do the wrong thing, then within seconds you'll have lost a lot of progress. If you feel like you could do without that level of intensity and stress, then I think Children of Morta is possibly the perfect game for you. Now, I think that's all I'm gonna say about the game for now. I will say that I'm gonna be doing the main story before I do the rest of the game, which is to say the Family Trials update. This update, by the way, is fairly recent. So even though I said that I've played the game and I know a lot about it, I'll essentially be going in blind when the time comes to do this. But I will be doing the main story first. So that's how this is gonna go. And I will join you in the next video, which is where I will actually be starting a fresh new save file, and we'll be going through the game, and I hope you have a good time. I will see you then, so take care.